this is Bo. I previously recorded a video talking about building this cabinet for my drum sander. At that time, I didn't have the drum sander yet, so there were some unknowns, some dimensions I didn't quite have the details for. When I set out to build the cabinet, I did get in touch with Laguna Supermax and try to get some of the technical details from them. Talked to some really nice people. Unfortunately, they couldn't provide me with the information I needed, so I just had to do as best I could with the information I had. I will put a link to the build video for the cabinet if you're interested. Either be on a card up here somewhere, or I'll put in the link. I'll put the link in the description for this video. All right. So before I get into all the details of setup and assembly, there's a couple things I want to touch on that I didn't record. First of all is the packaging of this thing. It came very well packaged. It came on a large pallet with 3 boxes, the conveyor assembly, the metal frame support for the sander, and then the sander itself. All shrink wrapped and strapped to the pallet. It came via freight, so huge thanks to the ABF freight guy who helped me push it up the driveway and into the garage, so it wasn't sitting out in the rain and snow. So I don't cover that, but like I said, well packaged, no damage to anything. It was all well taken care of. The other thing I don't cover is lifting this drum sander onto the cabinet itself. It weighed like 180 pounds, I think is what the box said. So a friend of mine and I lifted it up onto here. So big thanks to Andrew for coming over and helping me lift this up there. It's quite heavy. Okay, and then the one last thing I didn't cover that I didn't tape. It's funny. The one thing I didn't record was actually using bolts to mount the sander to the cabinet. So there are 4 bolts that mount the drum sander to this cabinet or to the metal frame. They are 3/8-16 bolts. The ones that are supplied are 3/4 inch long. And since my cabinet has a laminated 2 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood laminated together, I had to buy longer bolts, so I went with 2-inch long bolts. One of the details I didn't have when I built the cabinet was exactly the hole spacings between all 4 mounting locations. So for those of you who may be wanting to build your own cabinet or something similar, the spacing for the bolts are 9 1/8 inches front to back and 31.5 inches side to side, and that's center to center. And they're 3/8 inch bolts, so I think I drilled like a 7/16 hole in the cabinet to allow for a little bit of clearance and a little bit of adjustability, shifting it side to side. So with not knowing, since I didn't know exactly where the bolt hole locations would be to mount this, one of the things that does get pretty close and is not ideal is actually this rear spine piece back here. It's a 3/4 inch piece of plywood. And these bolts that go in the rear side are very close to that wall. And I think if I were to do it again, I should have shifted the sander just a little bit towards me, so I could have gotten more clearance here to this back wall. So I could have got a full-size washer on there. Right now I just have a really small washer and a lock washer. I'm holding it to the cabinet. Alternatively, I suppose I could have cut some type of pocket or notch in this back wall, so I could have got a full-size washer on there. But it's still just enough space to get an open-ended wrench and tighten it up. So no major issues. But like I said, I probably should have shifted it towards me a little bit. I just centered it perfectly front to back. That was my best guess when I first got the sander, when I took some dimensions of it. So, but yeah, everything fit up nice. Even the wings. I was concerned with the wings not being able to fold down, either because I didn't leave enough vertical space from the mid shelf to the top, or that the top would actually be too wide and the wings, the support arms would hit this. But everything folds up pretty nice. The back one folds, I think that's damn near vertical. And then this front one, the arm does contact the trim piece a little bit as it comes down, but still really close to vertical. Not going to be interfering with anything as I roll it around the shop. So the last thing I'll cover before I get into the setup and calibration process is just my overall, initial impressions of the sander and build quality. As I mentioned, all the packaging came undamaged. There are no damaged parts in here. Everything has good paint coverage. It's super sturdy, right? It's a lot of cast iron pieces, pretty big beefy motor, pretty well thought out. Even how you adjust the coplanar of the drum and the conveyor is pretty well thought out. How they got a little I guess jack bolt in here to help you raise and lower the conveyor to get that perfectly in line. So pretty well thought out design. Pretty, like I said, beefy machine. Haven't had a lot of chance to use it yet, but yeah, overall impressions are good. So I think that does it for my initial thoughts and kind of the initial how things laid out here. Now I'll get into the assembly process of putting this thing together and then adjusting, calibrating everything.
First step was to mount the conveyor assembly. Before I lugged this conveyor over, I removed the hardware on the outboard side, which was a couple of nuts and a washer, and on the inboard side was bolts and a washer. I'm mentioning here that the fast lever is pointing up when I'm putting this together, and that little silver plate that sits on top of the fast lever also stays in place underneath the conveyor assembly. Now that I have everything in place, I need to make sure that the bolts on the inboard side here are tight enough to hold the conveyor down, but loose enough to allow that fast lever to rotate. Alright, the next step in the process here was to remove the sandpaper from the drum and start the calibration process. The instructions note to use a uniform thickness board and pass it through the inboard side and kind of pinch it to the drum and then pass it through the outboard side and see what you get. In my instance, the conveyor was low on the outboard side, so I double checked the instructions, loosen up those 4 Allen bolts, and then use a jacking nut to adjust the conveyor height. Alright, so now I'm moving on to getting the sandpaper rolled back on the drum, as well as trying to use this take-up tool that came included with the drum sander. It did take me a while to get the right amount of insertion on the outboard side, so there wasn't a whole lot of extra length on the right hand or on the inboard side. So this take-up tool eluded me a little bit on how to use it, but essentially you put it into one of the small holes on the lever. You then pull the lever up with the tool as it is facing away from you, and you spin it towards the outboard side of the machine and land it on the sandpaper, acting as an extra finger, if you will, so you can insert the sandpaper fully into the drum. Next up was attaching the dust collection here. Haven't finalized that yet, but I wanted to run the drum sander and dust collection as a necessity. Alright, so here is the maiden voyage of the drum sander. I'm using a piece of MDF as my test and calibration piece. I wanted to take the calibration process one step further than the instructions mentioned. I wanted to make sure that the conveyor and the drum were perfectly planar with one another. So I'm using this piece of MDF and a set of digital calipers. And here I'm trying to show you the numbers in the video, but they're probably not going to show up. I think this first pass I was off by maybe 0.2 millimeters, which was pretty close, but I thought I could get it closer, so I go through the process of loosening the conveyor, using the jack bolt to raise or lower, and then tighten up the Allen bolts and run the piece through again, measure with the digital calipers again, and repeat until I get it near perfect. So fine-tuning of the conveyor height did take some time, 30 to 40 minutes maybe. Because at one point in time I was adjusting the jack screw the wrong direction, and B, it's a fine adjustment, it's a check, a fine adjustment, a check. Just to really dial it in, it takes some time.
So a quick tip for anyone who's adjusting their table heights, looking down from the top, turning it clockwise will raise the conveyor up on this side, and counterclockwise will lower the conveyor down. After screwing around with this for a while and adjusting this up and down, I finally was able to get down to a pretty consistent thickness board here. I got 15.45, 15.4, 15.3, 15.4, 15.4, and 15.2 measured with some digital calipers. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to pass it through one more time, adjusting the depth and just make sure that it still stays consistent. And then I'm going to attach the in-feed and out-feed tables, and hopefully that doesn't screw up all the work I've just done. Yay.
So as I mentioned, here I am installing the support arms for the in-feed and out-feed tables. And I'm just loosely attaching them with those with the socket head screws that come with the parts. And now I'm assembling the tables. One thing to note here is the table goes on the outside of the arms and kind of sits on them. The support arms and the tables are exactly the same, in-feed to out-feed side, but the conveyor is actually shifted towards the out-feed side of the drum, and that's why there's a smaller gap over there. Next up is adjusting the in-feed and out-feed tables so they are in line with the conveyor.
So this is kind of a iterative process, but here's the main catch screw that tightens the support bracket to the sander, and this little Allen screw here is what controls the pitch of the arms. So when I tightened the screw down last time, the big Allen screw, it pitched this end way up.
So this process also took some time, tightening the large cap screw, seeing how far the table was off, loosening this cap screw, adjusting the small Allen screw or set screw to adjust the pitch, tightening back up, adjusting again. Then of course you move on to the other side of the table. I started on the inboard side, went to the outboard. And once you get the arms set really close in terms of their pitch, and you can then do the final tweak with just the table. There's some adjustment on the table to get them perfectly lined up with the belt.
All right, now I'm done.
Yay, bear!
Yay!
So that concluded the assembly and setup process. Overall, I'm very happy with how that went. Pretty easy to assemble once you get the big heavy sander onto the cabinet. Speaking of the cabinet, I am pleased with how the drum sander fit on that, apart from the rear side bolts that were very close to that vertical spine. I should have shifted the drum sander just a little bit forward to allow some more room for a full-size washer. I'm looking forward to start using this drum sander and get it into my overall process. That's when I'll finalize the dust collection and where I will store this thing when not in use. Thanks for watching the video.